Georgia Raisman. This is the Monday Scoop, and I'm here this morning with Rob Taub, a New York-based author and podcaster who specializes in a wide variety of topics, but most recently in adult-onset diabetes, an issue that he has dealt with recently in his life and that many Americans deal with. About a third of the population, I'm told, is now either pre-diabetic or diabetic, and that's a huge number of people and a very big healthcare issue in this country. So, Rob, starting with the whole issue of adult diabetes, how did it come about that we got to this state that so many of us are subject to this disease?
I think that we lead sedentary lives. We have apps for everything. I don't live in the suburbs, but you could probably cut your lawn with a drone now if you're so inclined.
You can. I've heard about those.
And so people just don't have the same active lives that they once led, despite the fact that we think that we're living in a society where everybody eats healthy and they go to the gym and they get on the treadmill. I think that that's still a very pointed, segmented part of our society. And I'm not talking about socioeconomically, I'm talking about rich and poor. Diabetes touches everybody.
I gather too that food has a lot to do with it. Higher fructose corn syrup and a lot of additives a lot of added sugar in foods that were not present, say, a few decades ago, 30, 40 years ago and longer.
Yep, even though you and I grew up, at least I did, TV dinners being one of my favorite foods, I think at least children were more active then, but yeah, there are a lot more refined carbohydrates. It's one of the ironies in our society today is we bleach everything out of foods. We make bread white, we make rice white, and then we tell people that they should go out and spend $200 a month on vitamins to put all those things back into your system that have been bleached out of the food. And that refined food is terrible for you.
Well, do you think, given if you were an adult who was told you were pre-diabetic, what does that mean, and what do you do about it?
Pre-diabetes can apply to a lot of things. With somebody like me, I had a genetic history, so there was no way I was not going to be diabetic, but I could have done preventative things to help myself that I didn't do.
Would that have held it off longer?
It would have kept it at bay. I gained a tremendous amount of weight, but you have people that just have bad diets. And with pregnant women, when the additional weight will give them gestational diabetes. So you can get that, man or woman, the doctor would yell at me if it's not gestational, but you have the extra weight. Insulin can't get through the fat, it doesn't get to your cells, and it doesn't reduce the sugar in your body. So there are many people that are pre-diabetic just because of their terrible diets and lack of exercise, and it's addressable.
I didn't know that was the mechanism. It's the fat keeps the insulin from being properly
That's
absorbed.
Then some people just have dysfunctional or malfunctional pancreases that don't work properly, which I think is my problem, because now that I look at my history, there were things that used to happen to me that I didn't understand, where I would eat sugar and my body was releasing a load of insulin, and then my blood sugar would crash dramatically, and I would actually be like in a diabetic sweat. If you take too much insulin, your blood sugar will crash, you'll feel weak and dizzy, and you'll sweat a lot and feel like you're going to die. It's horrible.
And you didn't recognize that at the time?
No, I thought I was suffering from anxiety.
Well, see,
I blamed it on my mother. Oh, yeah, horrible Jewish mother. It's probably why I have this terrible anxiety.
Well, that's a good thing to know, and that there are symptoms that you might not recognize or you might attribute to other causes than the fact that you're having a diabetic or pre-diabetic episode, that your body isn't dealing well with insulin as well as it should.
We tend to think that anxiety or different physical manifestations happen because we're worried about something. It can merely be diet related, and a lot with me it totally was, and I learned to eat properly.
So I gather that doctors now can pinpoint people that they say are pre-diabetic through blood tests and blood sugar levels and things of that sort. So if that's the case, what are they saying that you should do to kind of make sure you stay on this side of the diabetes syndrome?
I have a disagreement with a lot of doctors, or Dr. Oz, for example. I think there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. That's another reason, actually, what's ironic is diabetes and obesity are growing because everybody wants a quick fix. So if you take this vitamin, you're not going to need medication. Well, if everything was that easy, we'd have no sick people in the world.
Right.
It's more complex than that.
So what do you suggest that people, what do you find has worked for you and people that you know, let's put it that way?
A balanced diet and not to treat individuals, to treat people as individuals and not as abstractions. Anytime you have somebody that says, this is my book, and if you just follow this, you're going to be great. Well, you and I may react to different foods in completely obtuse manners. It's just, it depends on us as individuals. It's easier to sell a book or a product if you treat everybody as an abstraction, if you treat one person or a million people the same, but you can't do that.
So but they also talk about weight loss, don't they, for pre-diabetics?
Yes.
I mean, that's another issue. So weight has to do with getting rid of that fat that's obstructing the insulin absorption?
Yeah, and it's over 1/3 of the adult population in the United States is obese right now.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. That's a very big number.
Yeah.
And obesity, I mean, it's such a negative factor for so many issues besides diabetes, right? I mean, cholesterol, heart trouble, cancer even. Some cancers even are related to obesity.
I think a big problem of it too right now is we can treat most anything, but that doesn't mean that that's right. People are not doing anything preventatively or worrying about it afterwards. And even
so if you're obese for your adult life, then all of a sudden you need a hip replacement, and that's a very expensive way of treating obesity, as opposed to learning to eat better when you're younger and getting a lot of exercise, so you never need that hip replacement.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, there are people that go, hey, well, and my Medicare, it's going to be great. We'll take care of my new hip, and I'll get my knee done too while I'm at it. But you're already too far gone. I mean, there are some people that legitimately need that. But if you're getting one of those operations because your body's carrying around an extra 40 pounds that it shouldn't have, then to me, that's wrong. And it's one of the things that will bankrupt our healthcare system. Again, we're always talking about this is going to be free or we'll give you that, but there's nobody saying, well, maybe you should exercise more or this is a diet that
try to
should
avoid that healthcare problem. Well, you have been living with full-on diabetes. So what does that mean for you in terms of your everyday life? Wake up in the morning and you do what?
I cry a lot. I battle a monster every day. It's like I wrote an article called The Diabetes Dragon. I get up and I do battle with this dragon. I take my blood in the morning, I see where that's at, and I'm diligent about it. And I exercise, I follow the right diet, and I still battle my weight every day. It's a fight, because if I didn't, well, there was a time where I was almost 60 pounds overweight.
Oh my gosh. And you went at that with diet and exercise, right?
Yeah.
Those two boring old things that the doctors insist that we do and that are so exasperating and ordinary, but they work.
I also went to Duke University, has a diet and fitness center.
How did you find that? What was that experience like?
It was great. And also, they accepted health insurance back then, which they don't now.
Is that right?
I first went over 13 years ago, which is when I was first diagnosed.
What did you learn from them?
They push balanced diet. They teach you how to count calories. They also think that food is an important part of our social existence, so that people shouldn't eat at their desk alone, and that you have to interact with others, and that lunch is a good thing, and that it should be slow. So people eat too fast, and if you eat a salad, it's going to take time. So to really have a healthy lunch maybe could take you an hour, and people are thinking now, I got to wolf a sandwich down in 10 minutes at my desk.
So the process of eating slowly and eating with people, and I guess at the risk of being too current, saying mindful eating is probably
Duke is a big thing on mindful, right? So it's okay to binge watch 12 hours of Game of Thrones on an afternoon, but God forbid you spend an hour sitting with a friend having lunch and slowly eating your salad. I mean, they actually have doctors there that they watch you eat. And the doctor came over to me and said, you don't put your fork down when you eat, you just sit there like this. And he goes, I want you to put your fork down
So,
and weight.
So is that a habit then? Have you been able to?
Try.
I mean,
I'm not perfect.
We are New Yorkers, right? New Yorkers inherently do not put their forks down in weight. That's just that's not in our genes.
But something as simple as that. It's like, what's the hurry? And eat too fast. It's not good.
Mm-hmm. So you've made this into a discipline, basically. This is that now your life on diabetes.
Yeah, but it's not like it's not a restrictive life in term. I like bourbon and I like scotch, and it causes blood sugar issues, so I don't have them constantly, but I treat myself to them. I've stopped eating pasta. I also realize there's certain things that I can and can't eat, and I think if people look at something like a pure obstacle, like, well, I can never have candy, I can never have pasta, I can never drink.
Yeah, then it becomes a series of no's.
Then they're going to rebel against it by not following any kind of discipline at all. So you have to just compromise.
I had a similar issue. I decided to lose weight as a decision rather than for medical reasons. And when I decided to lose weight, I decided you have to first do a number of things. You have to forgive yourself if you fail. If you fail on a particular day, you have to not say, okay, that's it for me, I'm giving this diet up. Secondly, you have to keep at it and realize that there are days in which if it doesn't work, it's okay. And if you follow it consistently with the diet and the exercise and all the boring stuff, if there's a day that you want that single malt scotch or that single barrel bourbon and it's not on the diet, that's also okay, because you're living your life. You're not trying to live according to a diet that's going to restrict you or be some kind of restriction that you're going to rebel against and then back off from the diet. I mean, it's got to be the way you live your life rather than
You've encapsulated everything I believe in perfectly and far more succinctly than I could. But yes,
thank you. Yeah,
you got it. I'm going to watch this show afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be a book. It can't be a book for 14 days and that's it. It's got to be the way you live your life, and there's got to be some element of forgiveness and flexibility in it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
impossible.
the irony now is we have more information at our fingertips with the internet, but we have rising problems with health, even though it's something that you can Google on your phone and find out about something that you have, like diabetes or obesity. Yet, I guess that unfortunately the algorithm, the first thing that pops up is take this magic pill, and you'll for $75, and you're not going to have diabetes anymore. And I have people, smart, successful friends who go, "Why do you die? I saw this thing on TV." And but again, like, one of the ironies is, if you want to talk about famous diabetics, the only person that anybody can ever mention to me is Wilford Brimley, who was like 400 pounds overweight. He was doing those commercials for some diabetes testing. I have diabetes. We need better role models.
Actually, I'm going to be talking with Pam Belloc, who is the science writer for the New York Times, for another segment of this, about how you evaluate really good health sources online and offline, and good science and health information, how you find it and how you determine what you're looking at and the value of it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because people do due diligence about their sports teams, and they know things about cars. They know far more about idiosyncratic subjects than they do their own bodies, and I find that to be bizarre. You have to learn about yourself, and I didn't just know what to eat. I also experimented with certain foods, and then I test my blood, so I'll see how my body reacts to things. And fortunately, I can eat candy. I think that kind of rushes right through. Carbohydrates are bad, and that's the case for most diabetics and people with obesity too.
So you had mentioned to me before that there was a possibility you were going to be using a new technique or a new method of measuring your blood sugar, was it?
I'm wearing a sensor right now.
And how has it been working for you?
Yeah, it's like anything else. It's a new product from Abbott Labs, but I am not a paid spokesperson for Abbott Labs. I have to.
It's a transdermal something or other.
It measures interstitial fluids. I can test it with my iPhone, and it's attached to my arm right now by heavy-duty glue. It's under my jacket, and I can swipe my iPhone or one of their readers, and it will give me a blood sugar level. It's not as purely accurate as taking blood from my finger, but it gives me you can only prick your finger so many times a day. You'll be like a pincushion. You could do this 100 times a day if you wanted. So I think technology is also going to change diabetes, and hopefully people with obesity too, because when you have a regular awareness of what's going on with your body, it can make you personally more preventative, because you're going to be worried, like, oh my God, I just ate this and my blood sugar is at 220, and when it should be somewhere between 90 and 130. You start to be more cognitive about what's going on.
I think awareness is an important word, because I think that's why people recommending diets talk about keeping food logs, because keeping a log of what you eat makes you aware that, yes, it was that when you did add that donut on Tuesday, so maybe on Wednesday you shouldn't add a donut, or that alternatively that you were writing down the calories for a 6-ounce steak, and maybe that steak was really tending more towards 10 ounces. And if you keep a food log with something like, I guess there's MyFitnessPal, and there are any number of apps for that purpose. It certainly helped me when I was losing weight to keep track of the calories, to aim for a certain number of calories every day and keep track of them. It keeps you really on target. So between calories, testing blood sugar levels, I think the body awareness is crucial to maintaining any kind of plan.
Duke does that. They make you make you fill out a menu, and it tells all the calories of what they're going to serve that night, and you have to add them up, and they want you to stay in the, believe it or not, like in the, I don't know how we do it, the 200 to 300 calorie range. You have 1,000 calories a day there, but somehow you walk around without being hungry. A lot of it is because you eat a lot of lettuce, believe it or not. There's the salads at lunch are enormous, so they fill you up, and they find the right balance between protein and carbohydrates, but they teach you, like, oh, this is so many carbs, this is so many calories, this is, and then you have, again, you're doing the due diligence. It takes like you fill out a week's menu. It takes about 2 hours to do it. And you have to sit there with a calculator and add up all the numbers and figure out what you're eating. But again, people are grousing about it usually. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm spending 2 hours. Gee, what, to save your life, to help you lose 100 pounds? I mean, there are people there who are morbidly obese. And there are a lot of people in this country who are, and we don't address it.
You had mentioned to me once, and I think it's a really good point. If you were thinking about, when you think about diabetes, you think about not just how am I now, but you're thinking about how am I going to be in 10 years, or how am I going to be in 15 years, or how do I want to live the rest of my life? And I think that's a critical point. So few of us actually think, or maybe there are more people who are not like me. I tend to be very last minute, but I think people ought to think more about, how do I want to live those last 10 years? How do I want to live the last 15 years of my life? Do I want to be dependent, either financially or emotionally or physically dependent? And if there are things, what can I do now to prevent those things from happening? And with diabetes especially, because there's so much dependence that can come from physically becoming deteriorated, it's even more important to think about that goal. I mean, how do you frame that in your life? Or was that helpful for you in determining how you were going to fight the dragon every day?
I've done a lot of radio programs with Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, and Dr. Evelyn Granieri is the head of geriatrics there. And her point repeatedly is, you have to think about what you're doing now and how it will affect the last 5 years of your life, because it could be like flipping a switch. It's just like, you could be in your 60s and I eat what I want and I don't exercise much and I feel pretty good. But it may not be until you hit 80. But then, do you want to be in a wheelchair or homebound or have to go to a nursing home or have your kids taken care of you or just be really sick? And I don't want that to happen to me. And I think that my diabetes, I have type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is when your pancreas just fails completely and isn't working. I'm not insulin dependent, but I'm not insulin dependent because I work so hard at it. But yeah, I think we have to really take into consideration how we want to live out the end of our lives as we're living longer now. Again, you and I are of a certain age. It wasn't, unusual for somebody to have a heart attack at 60 and die, and now that's practically unheard of. So, but what Dr. Granieri has also pointed out to me is we have outliers that people like to use as paradigms. Like there was that HBO special on aging, and they had Dick Van Dyke and Carl Reiner, and they're like, hey, Dick Van Dyke is 94 and he's dancing. Well, yeah, That's great. Most of us are not going to be like that. Let's start thinking about, Rob Taub and Georgia Raisman and what we're going to do for ourselves, because I don't expect probably to be alive at 94, let alone dancing. I could barely dance at 63.
Well, I think planning ahead. If you were going to give people advice on what's their scoop, what's the takeaway here? If you were 55, 60 and dealing with, say, diabetes, what's the takeaway? What's the advice for going forward? What's your best guess?
Read as much as you can about health and start to approach it slowly. That's another thing people think. It's like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to hire a personal trainer, and then, a week has gone by and nothing's happened. It's all a process, and you have to approach it slowly. And you can't just all of a sudden go out and try to run a few miles. And you do things in small increments. And like you said, I think it's important to keep a log and look at things. And if you lose a half a pound in a week, it's going to be great. Yeah, you're not going to lose. You find out you're 40 pounds overweight and you want to lose it all in 3 months. It's not going to happen, and people get upset. So I just think you have to set some goals for yourself and make them realistic. But once you do reach a few of those goals, you're going to feel great about it. Well, my kids put photos of me on the refrigerator, and then I saw how overweight I was. And I was fat, and that's a politically correct thing we're not supposed to say, but I was fat. And I wrote an article called My Fight with Fat, and the National Obesity Society wanted me to speak, but they said, you can't mention in your article, you can't call people fat. I'm like, look at this picture of me. I look like I had quintuplets inside me. I was fat.
Well, I think so. The takeaway is plan, go slowly, and think about where you want to be in 15 years, and it's not
Yes.
going to be incapacitated.
Yeah, and we don't have to be Dick Van Dyke. We don't have to aspire to that, but we could aspire to be our own healthy selves and live a great life. And I'm feeling pretty good right now at my age, and I expect to feel good in 10 years.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Rob. This has really been helpful.
Good to be here.
I appreciate your coming. Thanks. Thank you for joining me today. Next week on the Monday Scoop, I'll be talking with Carmine Minardi, owner of the acclaimed New York salon and an expert on how your hair's cut and color affect men and women's outlook on life. Looking forward to seeing you then.